Vishwa Mohan Bhatt, who you may be familiar with, the
Yes, of
slide
course.
guitar player.
Of course.
So Krishna is an incredible, they're from Jaipur. Krishna has deep roots in both Rajasthani folk music, but he is a classical musician. But he's always, I'd say he's a bit of a musicologist as well. So he's made kind of a lifelong work of understanding the relationship of Indian classical music with Rajasthani folk music. That's a big part of what he's endeavored to bring out. So he became a very close friend of mine quite young and uh, helped me in my understanding of Indian classical music and helped me in my understanding of how to bring the compositional ideas I was having together with the way an Indian classical musician thinks, as especially an instrumentalist who's you know um, generally limited. The Indian classical instruments are not generally created for chromaticism the way
Of course.
Western instruments are. And then the other person who came into my life at that time was Terry Riley, who is 20 years my senior, very famous composer. I would say the senior disciple of my Guruji Pandit Pranath. So he's a very serious khayal vocalist, but he's also writes string quartets and orchestral pieces. He's an amazing piano player, and he, I would say, kind of took me under his wing, and we toured and performed a great deal, both as a duet and also often in a trio with Krishna Bhatt, and later in different configurations. So he's somebody who, for me, was kind of a template for how somebody can maintain their personal identity while being immersed in various streams of music. For him, Western classical, jazz. He grew up playing, ragtime piano, and from an older perspective of on jazz than I had. My kind of perspective maybe started in the 40s and 50s,
Of
even though
course.
I didn't start there, but his probably started in the 20s and 30s. So, I was able to be immersed in kind of a long continuum of music. And I would say I was a bit of a late bloomer and really didn't release my first CD as a leader till I was 40. That was when I felt like these different streams had finally come together in a way that I felt it made sense for me to start putting my own compositions forward, bringing different artists together to express what I was hearing or trying to hear.
Great. I think even as an artist, you learn so much from your peers, and because everyone has a different perspective on music. It's so the field of music is so huge, and you can never complete it in one lifetime. You always pick up things from here and there, and for even for me, most of the stuff that I have, uh, those tiny little gems that I have learned are by watching my peers do what they do best. And it's been a really special journey for me to collaborate with some of the finest musicians in India. So, one thing I found really interesting is when we were talking the other day, you told me tons of stories and your memories of about your journey in India, and I think a lot of people would be interested to know about all your adventures in India. So maybe you can talk about that.
Well, we don't have. Oh, somebody's asked me to turn up my volume. That's easy for me to do. I don't know if somebody can comment if that's better. I've just turned up my microphone. But so many stories. Was there one in particular? I can't remember which ones we discussed.
Um, there was one about the Taj Mahal.
Well, I'm going to go back a little before that. I was saying
Yeah.
I accompanied my wife, who received something called a Watson Fellowship to study
Okay.
in India. She was attending Mills College, which is where both Pandit Pranath and Terry Riley were teaching. And my Guruji had a student named Karunamai who lived at the Sri
Okay.
Aurobindo ashram in Delhi, and she was going to be our teacher. So we arrived in India. Again, this is 1980, so a very different India, virtually no telephones, let alone no computers, no cell phones. Even landlines didn't really work very
Okay.
much. If you wanted to travel somewhere, we would have to spend a day at the train station, lining up at the wrong windows to buy those little cardboard tickets that I don't think you remember. But so we arrived in India, and with our Western thought modality, we figured, okay, lessons will happen Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from this time to that time. And as you said, she said, don't worry, you have many lifetimes to do this work. First, you have to get a tambora if you're going to sing. And what you need to do is get my tamboras from Nainital, where they are. So it was kind of like like a quest in an old fairy tale, that we had to go get the
Okay.
Holy Grail. And we went up to there was a Sri Aurobindo outpost in the hills above Nainital that had not yet actually been built. So we had to get on a bus, and if you've ever traveled on this road from Delhi to Nainital, it's kind of a death-defying journey where you're on the bus and there's just a perilous drop off almost the entire time down the sides of a cliff. And in
Of
front of us,
course.
what? So most of the people are reading out loud from the Bhagavad Gita or chanting Ram's name so that if they should die, God's name will be on their lips. And in front of us is a soldier or policeman with a rifle that's pointing at my face, and he's fallen asleep, and the rifle's bouncing up and down, hitting the bottom of the bus. And I'm kind of like trying to just stay out of the way in case it goes off. It's not going to shoot me. But so we did complete that quest and came back to Delhi and began our studies. But that was like a 2 week journey, and walking through the jungles there, we met a young man who just loved to hike. So we would walk to Neem Karoli Baba's ashram was like a half day's journey from there through the jungle where monkeys would be throwing things at us from the trees. It was
Amazing.
that was
And all this just to get Tampura?
two
Two
temporas,
Tampuras.
and perhaps to prove
Yeah,
our the seriousness of our intention
of
to
course.
study.
Yeah, you didn't have Amazon those days, didn't you?
You didn't have Amazon. You didn't have a tambora on your iPhone.
Of
If you
course.
wanted a tambora, it had to actually be one. And then later had them made for us at Ricky Ram, a famous instrument maker in New Delhi, who made a special tambora the in this old style that my Guruji had worked with him on. No varnish, plain wood, mahogany, uh, gourd, sandalwood bridges, sandalwood tuning beads, very beautiful instruments, which then we lugged around the world with us in giant wooden cases. There were no fiberglass
Of
molded
course.
cases in those days. So I'm not even sure how it really happened because we brought them into Japan on the way back and back to the US. There were things that we did, like the story you mentioned, singing inside the Taj Mahal in the middle of the night, things that you can't really imagine happening
Wow.
today.
So you've literally seen the journey from analog to the digital world that we have today.
Oh, yes. I mean, the first recordings I made were on tape. I don't go back to wire or wax.
Of course.
And I have to say I've always been a little bit wary of technology, be, and I don't know that in many ways my fears are unfounded, and in fact some of those fears are being unfounded right now as I talk to you, because one of my fears of technology in the music realm is that it does enable people to make music without establishing relationships with other people. You know, you can
Yes.
sit at home and program the drums. You can sit at home and program a loop or pull in a loop. So you can make a whole piece of music without interacting with another human being. Yet here you and I are interacting across continents, you know?
Of
So
course.
one thing that's happened, especially during COVID, is this ability and this not only ability but necessity to connect with people. So,
Yeah,
my
because even during the COVID times, I think it's connected people a lot more, because I get to interact with people over Zoom that I wouldn't. They're so far away, but now the travel time is just decreased, and we're able to work online on Zoom. And even for music education, I think it's been a really good thing, um, because I teach a lot of people, and through LivDemy, and I think I'm able to reach a lot of people. I think you have a masterclass coming very soon, right?
I think just a week from today or a week from tomorrow. Yes, I do. I'm nervous about it because I haven't done much teaching where I don't have the opportunity to interact in real time with my students. So, I'm a big relationship person, as I said. My relationships with my Guruji, with Pandit, I mean, with Krishna Bhatt, with Terry Riley, and then later, with Zakir Hussain and Kala Ramnath, all the musicians that I've,
Of course.
even Hari Prasad Chaurasia. I like to be in their presence. I like to listen to the stories they tell. It's you learn so many things from being with a person that go beyond or deeper than just the technical aspects of music, the chords, the scales, which of course are essential because you have to have the tools to work with.
Of course. Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree with it. There's nothing like being right next to the teacher and being able to hear everything so clearly rather than using headphones. That's something I totally agree with. But
Hmm.
um I still think in today's times is that this technology has enabled so many more people to learn, because I know that in the US, because of Skype and Zoom, a lot of Carnatic musicians are able upcoming Carnatic musicians are able to source out the best teachers from Chennai. And that's something my generation has really taken advantage of. So if you want to learn from a very particular guru, and if you are still studying in school in the US, you can just do a Skype class, and that's something
It's
that's really
fantastic. It's
enabled.
fantastic, and because those musicians aren't traveling right now, they're able to sit and offer these classes. Now it's very much the upside of the restrictions that we now have is that we are making like meeting you. I'm looking forward to doing something in the in the
Definitely.
in the future with you, and
Of course. It
and
would be
it's
an
made.
honor for me to collaborate with you. That would be an awesome thing.
Well, it's been, like I said, it's been an opportunity for me to really step up my relationship with technology and feel comfortable with it. I'm writing music right now for a theater company here called Enact, and I've done it, at least the setup for it, all on Logic. It's something that I've had to say, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to have a relationship with this technology, make it my friend, and hopefully paint the kind of pictures that I want, to say the things, and then be able to call in artists so that to I can send tracks across the world, and somebody can put a bansuri or a sitar or vocal on it. It's everybody, or not everybody, but most musicians are figuring out a way now to interact with the creative realm through these digital mediums.
Yes, exactly. I think the thanks to Zoom and Skype, we're still surviving today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then the platforms like your Geo Shred, like Logic, like Ableton Live, the the things that people are. I'm still, of course, a lot of my life is still dependent on a little tiny piece of bamboo, a little
Of
reed
course.
that makes my saxophone sound. So, and
Yeah.
of course. and of course the breath, which is such a big, important part of my riyaz, my practice,
Of
is
course.
transforming breath into sound.
Yeah. I just have to charge my iPad every day. It's a lot easier for me.
Well, that is the thing. We have to adjust every note to make sure it's in tune with our breath, with our
Exactly.
lips, with our unconscious, conscious and unconscious parts of our brain.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, can you talk a little bit? I think a lot of people are curious to know about your masterclass. So maybe if you can take us through something that.
Well, it's still in development. I'm still working on uh, exactly what the timings of things are going to be, since the flow has to be dictated pretty much just by me rather than by a, let's say, an organic back and forth. So what I'm hoping to really explain is how we as musicians, and somebody like me who has, I think, a bit of an east, and for lack of better words, I'll use the terms Eastern and Western, but
Okay.
perspectives. Um, how we look at, and this is, I have this feeling that notes have gravitational relationships to each other. Okay, this the seven notes are like planets. Each one has its pull. Each one has its gravity. The sa, the tonic being, this immutable, powerful force. The pa being kind of the next one. In Hindustani terms, it was explained to me by my Guruji as Brahma being sa, Pancham being the sun. The sun is like kind of this powerful entity in our lives. It's not always visible, but it is always there. And how these notes, if you're playing a major scale, um, you feel how the fourth degree wants to fall back into ga. And you feel that in the Indian system where it's happening over a drone, but you feel that as well in the Western system where it's happening in harmonic motion. So, Indian music, we've got the tonic never changes. But as you know, in Western music, we want to have the opportunity to just move through all the keys if we feel like that. So, in the class, I'm going to look at how how that maybe how that occurs, and how it helps us in our improvisations, and how it forms maybe the knowledge base for what we do. And I look at, I'm starting by looking at a couple of songs in Western music where the melody stays within a major scale, because I'm going to start with the major scale just because it's so major. And how you can play that melody without chord changes, but then how the composers, the Western composers, heard, although it's a major scale, it it implies harmonic motion, and what and how those notes change when the chord changes under it.
Of
And
course.
how we emphasize maybe what I think of as sort of this natural gravitational relationship between notes, how we emphasize that, or how we soften certain tensions by changing, or increase certain tensions by changing the the tonic or creating a different chord. I have a question. Do you find it easier to innovate and create new compositions while playing solo or while collaborating? And can you talk about the moment when creativity sparks? Do you want to take that one, or you want me?
I think it's for both of us.
You want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So, so for me, I think the spark can come anytime because I'm always thinking of music and new ideas. Sometimes it just comes when I'm in the bathroom. Sometimes it comes when I'm walking on the street. So when the only thing is when I have that idea in my head, I somehow just record it because since I'm always working and thinking, that thought at that moment is absolutely precious. It might not come again. So whenever I have an idea in my head, I somehow get my phone, I record it, and it's right there. And when talking about innovation and new compositions, it's always fun when there is another person to collaborate with because you come up with something fresh. Because when it's just you, your ideas are always a result. I think for me, it's always a result of my past experiences. But when I have another person that I'm working with, it's a combination of what the other person has and what I have, and together we are able to create something fresh. So collaboration is always something that is very special. And as George said, you get to learn so much from your peers. That for me, it's when I'm working with someone else, it just makes the composition a lot more special.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree. I'd say that most of the composing I've done comes from me either improvising at the piano or improvising on the saxophone. That's been how initially my work as a composer evolved. My first album, I think I spent a lot of musical time with Krishna Bhatt, the sitarist, and uh, and incorporated his ideas into my compositions. I think then later, I think as I became maybe more solid as a composer and had a better understanding of what my musical expression was trying to be, I was able to collaborate more easily. Early on with Steve Smith, the drummer from the band Journey, who then joined my group Summit, and he actually had been studying Carnatic rhythms, and we did some composing together where he would just say, "Oh, I've learned this Corvi or I've learned this Mora, and I want to put these elements together. Can you make a piece out of it?" So he would give me a rhythmic framework in which to compose. And I don't know about you, but for me, often having restrictions can be can provide a great opportunity for creativity because it's not like you look at 1,000 colors and say which one do I choose. You maybe say, okay, I've got 50 colors, so you have fewer choices and you can focus perhaps more on what you're creating. And lately, Kala Ramnath, the wonderful Hindustani violinist, she and I have written quite a few pieces together, most for, or many for performance. We have a trio called Elements with a wonderful harpist from the Netherlands. And yeah, it's just a trio. It's me on sax and Gwyneth Ventink on harp and Kala Ramnath on violin, and sometimes singing. So, I love having her feed me melodic ideas, which are, if I'm looking at a raga and I want to compose in it on the saxophone, I will probably wander away from the true melodic purity of that raga because things that happen on the saxophone or things that happen in my mind with certain melodic relationships, I may wander away. But if she's giving me a melody, it's going to probably be more grounded in the raga, and then we work together to evolve that. A recent project I've been working on with Arjun Verma, who's a wonderful sitarist who teaches at the Ali Akbar College here in California. Raised in the West, kind of like you, but with a rigorous classical Indian training, and so we actually put together a whole 40-minute performance, having never sat in person together, doing it over phone calls and Zoom calls and electronic transfers of things. So, yes, those collaborations have been wonderful, but I feel that for me, I have to spend a lot of time alone with working with the creative. with the creative forces, whatever they are. And
Yeah,
lately, like you, I've been using the phone to capture things as I'm walking, as I'm improvising. I'm no longer depending on my personal memory. If I have a digital memory available,
of
I'll,
course.
I'm, but that's new
Yeah.
for me. I didn't always trust it.
Yeah, and I love what you said about, having restrictions that to so that you just the fact that, for example, you just have 50 colors to choose from. Even I love the idea of having restrictions, especially when I'm working on Logic and I'm producing music. I kind of have a palette of sounds to choose from. I decide, okay, this is the kind of palette of sounds, and I'm going to create ideas just out of this. And the ideas that come out of that, instead of just blindly exploring, turn out to be much better. So even in Indian classical music, when you have the restriction, the raga is the restriction itself, and
Yes, it's the restriction and it's the freedom, which is
exactly.
which is so wonderful. And I think I'm, maybe a little bit different from other Western musicians in that I find that the restriction of raga rather liberating. You know, I one of I have a memory of hearing a concert quite a while ago, probably at least 30 years ago, of Hari Prasad Chaurasia and Zakir Hussain. It was here in Berkeley, and he was playing Rag Bhupali, five notes, and
Wow.
45 minutes of a lop. I felt like not a line was repeated. It just felt like it was this endless flow of inspiration, and that was made a big impression on me. A jazz musician, especially younger ones these days, will immediately look. How can I go outside? How can I add all this complexity and tension, and be very difficult for most musicians trained with an understanding of jazz to stay within a pentatonic scale for 45 minutes before they go into the composition, which is going to be another 45 minutes. These master Hindustani musicians who play these long alaps, and certainly not everyone can do it, but somebody like Hariji, it's just like it's just yes, so many ways to unfold those melodies, and just the sound. I mean, the sound is so important, and what happens within one note.
Exactly. There's just so many things that you can do with just while just having restrictions. I think it's just the ability to explore what is possible with certain restrictions that makes a great musician. Yeah, I think,
Well,
yeah, we have a
yeah.
question. Um, we are not so used to listening and appreciating, while we may, sorry, so we are not so used to listening and appreciating Western music, while we may just enjoy listening to it. What aspects of Western music can we pay attention to or take cognizance of for appreciating it?
You want to speak as the Western musician?
So I think for this is something that, even for me, it took some time before I was able to enjoy jazz music, because as an Indian classical musician, as you said, there's this one key. I'm not so used to listening to modulations. Of course, I learned piano for the longest time, but uh, it took a while for me to actually understand that, okay, there is a chorus in jazz, and then this is the improvised part. So actually, this is something that I too wanted to ask you. If you're new to jazz music, and if you're listening to it for the first time, how would you appreciate it? It's a question a lot of uh, people generally ask me.
Well, I think there are a couple of ways. And, I was going to speak to Shilpa saying Western music. At this point, I'm going to limit my conversation about Western music to jazz because there's Western music is such a huge, just
Exactly.
like saying Indian music, it covers so many things. But the area that I tend to deal with is jazz and the various forms of African American music. So, I think one thing that is helpful is if you start to listen to the blues, because the blues is it's where it's the music from which jazz kind of evolves, and in many ways, it's a music that feels like it has a relationship to Indian classical music in that blues traditionally takes place in one cycle. You could look at it as a slow ectal. We talk about 12 bar blues. So it's, you could look at it as 12 beats, each one divided into, in, you know, da, two, three, four, da, each one of those being a bar. And it always keeps that cycle. And the way the melody works in the blues is very much raga like. And I'll talk about this in my master class as well, because you can use one scale throughout the blues to make an effective statement, even though there are chord changes that take place in that 12 bar cycle. So, as a listener, if you learn to identify the structure of the blues, uh, as well as hearing, going back to older blues musicians like B.B. King, and and even older Bessie Smith, and then coming up, if you're listening to progression of jazz, how did Duke Ellington's band play the blues? How did Charlie Parker play the blues? How did John Coltrane play the blues? But if you go back to listening to the early blues, you'll get a sense of that structure, and you'll get a sense of when people are working within what I'd call the raga aspect of the blues, sticking with just a few notes that express all of the harmonic motion. And then when they move into the more chromatic aspect of the blues, where they're layering harmonic nuance upon harmonic nuance to get through these 12 bars. And then trying to have your ear listen to what is the bass doing. Because the bass, in this case, in the blues, it might be a bass guitar, it might be an upright bass, but they're the ones who are expressing the harmonic motion. So on, so there's the singer, like BB King will be singing, or Muddy Waters. They call it Stormy Monday, Tuesday's just as bad. They call it Stormy Monday, Tuesday's just as bad. Uh, Wednesday's even worse, and Thursday's oh so sad. So what I just sang is a full form of the blues. The first two lines exactly the same, even though they're happening over different chord changes. So if you can listen to what the bass is doing under that, listen one time through listening just to the bass. Listen one time through just listening to the melody. Listen one time through and see if you can hear the chords. Then that starts to open up your ear to what might be happening in improvisation and in song structure.
Beautiful. I don't think anyone would have could have explained it better than you.
I don't know, but I hope that's helpful. And of course, listening is the key. Even, people come to me and say, I want to play jazz. I was like, well, do you listen to jazz? They're like, no. And I'll be like, well, you have to listen to it. It's a language. It's a
Of
language. I
course.
mean, we can talk about rag kafi, a minor scale, right? Minor mode. And it's you've got the same materials, but when you put them together, you're going to have a different expression in North India. You're going to have a different expression in South India. You're going to have a different expression in the United States. You're going to have a different expression in West Africa. I mean, people are going to use the flavors and the colors of their experience and their in their culture to express. My hobby is cooking, and you see these different flavors that exist in different parts of the world. In Punjabi cooking and in Mexican cooking, you see a lot of similar ingredients, but you know that you're eating Mexican food when you're eating it. You know that you're eating Punjabi food when you're eating it. It's going to be put together with a cultural understanding, a regional understanding, an understanding that comes from the physical reality of the place you live, and in what you've are accustomed to. If you've been listening to somebody sing Carnatic music, you listen to children on the streets in India, and they're singing with a kind of ornamentation that you couldn't take a trained singer in the West and make them learn, because these children are growing up listening to Indian style vocals, and because it's a language, they learn it. You know, for me, listening to Tamil, it's a language I don't speak. It's hard for me to identify the words, but a 2 year old growing up in a Tamil speaking household, they master it. It's not because we have that capacity, but it's what you're familiar. You have to listen to to get it inside.
Yeah. And I think if you listen to something for quite a while, you will be able to appreciate it a lot more.
As a listener, I see Sakshini asks how easy or difficult it is it for a proficient jazz musician to learn Carnatic and vice versa. You want to take that one?
I can speak, as George said, it's definitely important uh, for someone as a musician. If you're a Carnatic musician, jazz music is still a different style. It doesn't make it easier, or you know. So you still have to learn how. Um, for me, I still had to learn Western music to have knowledge about chords, how harmony works, and if I just learned Carnatic music, it would take me a lot longer to be able to cope with the Western side of things, and it makes it easier for me to produce fusion music just because I have a good knowledge of Western music. So I think if you're an Indian musician, it's still, if you want to take up jazz, I think it's pretty important to have a little bit of knowledge about how Western theory works and how the whole structure of jazz works, and how and it's very important to listen to jazz music so that you can adapt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you say. And again, I go back to the listening. I mean, when you ask to learn Carnatic and vice versa, I think you can learn how to play with or perform or interact with musicians from a culture whose music is not embedded in you. So I can learn a piece by Kumaresh and Ganesh and I can perform it with them, but I haven't gone through the rigorous training that every Carnatic musician goes through.
Of course.
The first 11 years of learning all the kritis and learning, all the great compositions by the various Tyagaraja and all the great composers. So I'm never going to be able to draw on that. Likewise, I work with Rona Majumdar, great, brilliant flute player, can learn anything. And I teach him a great piece by John Coltrane, Naima, and he can learn it and perform it beautifully. But when I sit down at the piano, I can play 100 show tunes from the 40s and 50s that created an underpinning for jazz. Ronu's, because he's spent his life learning Indian classical music, he's not going to have that wealth of repertoire informing what he brings to the jazz. But that's what's beautiful about collaboration. Likewise, I'm not going to know all the bhajans and all the guts and all the bandeshes that somebody raised in North India is going to know, but I can play a raga with him and bring my sensibilities. So that's where the cross pollination creates something new. So how difficult or easy it is, I guess the answer is what your aptitude is and how much work you're willing to put in. So it could be incredibly difficult. It's always going to be challenging, but the more you love the journey, the easier it's going to become.
Exactly. We have another question. If it weren't for your musical career, what would you be doing?
W- Well, I was on a medical path before I veered, as a pre-med student and had done a lot of work. I could see myself being in the healing arts. Um, that's something that I
Yeah.
also had kind of a love affair with the ocean. Maybe I would be an oceanographer or a marine biologist. That was another little fantasy that I had.
I think I would have started my own restaurant.
Oh, really? You like to cook also?
Oh yes,
Oh,
I really love to cook. It's like my hobby.
oh, me too. Me too. And
Yeah.
I have a big garden, so I grow a lot of the vegetables. My latest acquisition is a curry leaf plant,
Oh wow.
so I can really have fun. And a lot of musicians, that's one of the things I was able to do for my Guruji that got me into his good graces is I could cook for him, and he had to be on a no salt diet, which nobody in India at that time was willing to
Oh wow.
believe. So I would cook unsalted food for him, which is sort of unheard
Amazing.
of. Yeah. Oh, so now we won't just have to make music together. We're going to have
We
to
have to
cook
cook
together.
together.
And most of the Indian musicians who travel to California know there's always a good meal at my house.
I'm
Selva,
definitely visiting.
Selva Ganesh was staying with us, and one day he was just, "Oh, I miss Malagapodi. I need Malagapodi to make my rice tasty." And I said, "Well, let's figure out how to do it and make some." He was crying. He's like, "Oh."
Amazing. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. So we have around 8 minutes left, and Satyajit is asking if we can play something before we end the session.
Okay. How would you like to do that? As you know, in on this kind of platform, we can't really play in a rhythmically organized fashion
I think
because
we have to go back and forth.
yeah. So, do you want to set up a drone? Do we want to choose a key and a scale? Do you have a
What I have like
or
I just have a phone Tanpur.
okay, a phone?
Yeah. What scale do you want to play on?
We can use D because it's the universal.
That's D. Can you hear it? That was fun.
Very nice. That is an amazing instrument you have. It's just unbelievable. And unbelievable that you learned to play it. I think it was actually I mean, it's been a couple of years, right, since you started playing the
It's
instrument?
been 5 years, but
Yeah.
I started performing with this only 2 years because it takes a while to get the dynamics right because it's not a touch screen surface. So I had to figure out some sort of alternative way to control the volume while I'm playing.
I remember seeing something. It seems like quite a while ago, a duet of you and Jordan Rudess, right?
Oh yes, Jordan is amazing. He's the person who came up with the idea for this. And yes, there was a track called East Meets West, and that was around 2 years ago. It was with Jordan, and we had Mohini Day on bass and the amazing Manjunath PC on Konakol. So that was
They
uh,
were all. Oh, okay. Funny, I know both of them, but I for some reason I thought it was just a duet. But maybe I was.
yeah. So I did. I think I've done. Yeah, that was the main collaboration that I've done with him. Plus,
Okay, all right.
me and him have done a couple of GeoShred videos as well together. So
Yeah, yeah. No, no. I was just like I was looking at that iPad and going, "What is that?" And how did he learn to play? That was just. It's enough for me to play an instrument that I've been playing for 50 years, but to yeah, to see somebody take an iPad and turn it into something so musical.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we just have 45 seconds left, but uh, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It's been such an honor for me to talk to you.
No,
Um,
it's been wonderful for me. Very, very enjoyable. Really nice to get to know you a little better.
Definitely. And I hope we can work on something together in the near future.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I hope so. And hope to see some of you out there at the master class next weekend.
Definitely. It's on 24th, right?
Uh, that sounds right. Let me
Yep.
see. That uh, I guess
I
it's the
think
20 for
they
you
can
for
find